Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, if you live in the UK or mainland Europe, then you've definitely heard of ALDI. In fact, I think they have lots of stores in the US as well, but my North American viewers will have to confirm this in the comments. ALDI is a discount supermarket that mainly sells food, but they also have special buys, which are a rotating selection of limited edition non-grocery items. Sometimes the things are really random, like I've gone into the store before with the intention of buying some orange juice and walked out with a toolkit, leaf blower and ice cream machine. They've even sold computers in the past, like this one, the Medion S71. I picked this up on the used market for a couple of £100, though it was originally sold through ALDI in Europe for €678 and £599 in the UK back in 2020, based on the limited info I could find. 6 years later, and it's still in excellent condition with the original specs unchanged. So what's inside? First of all, you'll notice the layout a little different than most systems. It's like the PC has been assembled in the case upside down, but it makes sense inside this small chassis as air is drawn in through the vent at the top, rather than getting trapped in a tiny space underneath. The reflective plastic front panel is removable, so let's see what's hiding behind here. Nothing, as expected, though we do have an unused SD card slot. Some of them may have had a drive in here too. This case was probably mass produced for a few different systems. I actually like how it looks behind the front panel, simple and industrial. But it's time for the big reveal. Here we have the upside down ALDI PC in all its glory. The blue deep cool CPU fan looks good. I can't confirm if this is original or not, but from what I understand, the main specifications are unchanged since 2020. It's 50-50 as to whether I get covered in half-decade-old dust when opening up an old PC, but this one is very clean. We've also got an exhaust fan, a pretty rare sight for more budget-friendly pre-builts. This rig is powered by a Medion Power Block 550. I cannot speak for its quality, I have never seen one of these before, but it does have a 6+2 pin and standard 6-pin graphics card connector, so they must think it can handle something a bit more beefy. It does only have a single 4-pin CPU connector, but this is more than adequate for the 10th gen i5 in here, more specifically the i5-10400. I used to have one of these in my main system. It was an excellent processor for the money. The B460 motherboard itself isn't the worst I've seen, which is a compliment. It looks to be standard form factor with normal connectors, so it could be used in another case if we wanted to. There's USB 3 here as well, though I'd expect as much from a socket 1200 board. We also have M.2 slots with a 1TB SSD in here from factory. A nice surprise. I was expecting a SATA drive, though we do have a few SATA headers if we want to add more storage. Now, with this board we are limited to 65-watt CPUs, which isn't much of a surprise. There's no VRM cooling, no overclocking, and RAM speed is restricted to 2666 MHz. Nothing shocking as far as motherboards inside OEM PCs go. The i5-10400 shouldn't suffer at all. It's a low power 6-core chip that will work just fine at maximum load, hopefully. But the CPU isn't the problem here. I'd say this has actually aged pretty well. It has 6 cores, 12 threads, and a 4 GHz all-core speed. The issue in the ALDI PC, in order of worst to best, will be the single 8GB stick of DDR4, which you may have already noticed, and the 4GB GTX 1650 graphics card. Now the RAM is actually rated for 3200 MHz, but it will run at 2666 as part of this system with no way to change it. Speed won't matter here though. Windows will use most of the 8GB just at the desktop, so gaming performance will probably suffer quite significantly. The graphics card, the 1650, a very tiny original GDDR5 version, is from Zotac. This gets all its power from the motherboard itself and requires no connectors. Of course, as I mentioned, the power supply does have a couple, so we should be able to upgrade this at some point to something more capable and perhaps a little newer. This was the dustiest part of the whole build, which is understandable, but it's nothing my electric air duster couldn't handle. But as far as pre-builts go, budget pre-builts, I'm pretty happy with what we have here, but we should turn it on and test it out. Now there is no RGB here, well, just B, a little bit of blue light surrounding the power button. The system booted straight into a factory reset Windows 10, and after a quick restart and BIOS check, I was pleased to see a normal, albeit simple BIOS. There's nothing here that we need to change. So these components would have been nearly new when this PC launched in ALDI stores back in 2020, and while it still feels like a usable machine in 2026 to some extent, the RAM is definitely a problem, especially with Windows 10 and 11, and especially in single channel mode. The SSD is keeping the OS feeling pretty snappy, but the memory makes multitasking feel very slow at times. Modern games that require shader compilation also took ages to load, but this wasn't the worst of it. Gaming is borderline unbearable in some cases. Battlefield 6 was reduced to a slow motion mess. Sure, the 1650 limits what we can do with the graphical options, but under the right circumstances it will be more capable than this. Counter-Strike 2 wasn't that bad with over 60 FPS, but it was the stutters that made it feel bad, and they always seemed to happen at the wrong time. It was more occasional but severe hitching than stutter, actually. Fortnite suffered from similar problems, yet to be honest, felt a lot better overall. The issues seemed to be far less frequent, mainly occurring during the first 5 minutes of a match. If you can survive longer than that, then you'll be rewarded with smoother and more consistent gameplay, though it is far from perfect. Forza Horizon 6 froze intermittently, usually when I was in the middle of a race or trying to avoid hitting a tree. At one point I thought I narrowly avoided crashing with a last minute evasive manoeuvre, only for the game to freeze up and then continue as my car made impact. Imagine if time itself just froze as you were driving down the motorway and then unfreezing a couple of seconds later. That would be absolutely terrifying in real life. I think the best result was probably GTA 5, the enhanced version of the game. Now it wasn't perfect, but it was the most consistent experience today. I'd find it frustrating after 10 minutes, but the emptier the area, the higher the frame rate, so spending most of the time at the beach is probably the best way to play. Though that's far from realistic. There's fun to be had, but you can't spend all your in-game time running up and down the sand. So let's see what we can do to fix this. Now the 4GB 1650 graphics card is still going to limit us in some games. We'll need to stick with reduced settings, but adding another 8GB of the same speed RAM should transform our frame rates. I kept the graphics settings the same for comparison's sake, but as you'll see, I think we could have pushed things a tiny bit higher, at least in some cases. I was under the impression that the 1650 was more of a limitation first time around than it actually was, because our problems were mainly caused by the single 8GB stick of RAM. Battlefield 6 is no longer a slow motion disaster, though it's still a blurry one, as I was still using 50% resolution to try and hit 60 frames per second. This time around, our now 16GB ALDI PC could do this. In fact, our average frame rate doubled. We've gone from 38 to 76, along with improved percentile lows, though I think the CPU may still pose a bit of a problem in busier maps with more players. This is quite a processor intensive title. Similar performance improvements can be seen with Counter-Strike 2. Before, our ALDI machine was struggling to hit 100 frames per second, and now we're averaging 170. The 1 and 0.1% lows have been increased massively as well. The performance of Fortnite doubled with noticeable improvements to the smoothness and consistency of the game before our 0.1% low dipped into single digits, but that is no longer the case. The GPU is now the limitation most of the time, as it should be, instead of the RAM. It's interesting to note just how much impact another RAM stick has on gaming performance. I wonder how things would have been different if the 8GB was originally in dual channel mode, two 4GB modules instead of a single 8GB stick. Forza Horizon 6 also seems fixed, though getting closer to the city or racing in multi-competitor competitions will still cause performance issues, this time related to VRAM. Looking at the frame rate, and it's easy to think we could turn the video settings up a bit, but the 4GB 1650 will cause a few more stutters. GTA 5 Enhanced, possibly our best performing game with 8GB of system RAM, got even better with 16. It's interesting to think about how much performance was being left on the table here and how a simple upgrade resolves our issues. Of course, the price of RAM at the moment makes this a more costly upgrade than it would have been months ago, but at least it's DDR4 and not DDR5 in here. I threw in another couple of results just to see how this configuration handles more challenging titles. Cyberpunk is the first. The low preset still looks good and is best suited to our 1650 with FSR enabled, of course. FSR 3 didn't perform any worse than FSR 2.1, so I stuck with the newer version for 55 FPS, though we did get occasional stuttering. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is very well optimised, and while it hit over 60 frames per second, just about, we did still see some inconsistencies because of the card, though I still had fun. 4GB of VRAM really is cutting it fine these days, but I think most of you knew that already, and it's going to depend on the games you like to play. But it's a good effort from the 2020 ALDI PC, and there is still some potential. Now, I don't think we can upgrade the CPU all that much, if at all. I'm not sure how the board would handle, say, an i7, and I think using a low power T version of the chip probably wouldn't improve things in games. If it will, then great, I'll look out for one, but I think we'd be better off focusing on a more powerful graphics card to make the most out of this PC. Now, this board also supports 32GB of DDR4 maximum, but again, I think any gains would be minimal, perhaps non-existent in most gaming scenarios. Certainly not worth the money anyway, especially at the price of RAM these days. But what should we do with this now? Let me know your thoughts down below. I don't think it did too bad for a half-decade-old budget-focused machine once it got extra RAM. It certainly isn't the worst pre-built I've ever bought, not by a mile. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.